Prepper Joe's cannon beans in his bunker deep below. Had a shovel and some gasoline and a stack of crossbows. One sunny day, skies turned dark. A shadow cast a shiver out from the clouds in a circus bark. Creeping clowns make you quiver. It's bird flu, clown zombies, aliens invade from Mars. Prepper Joe's ready in his long johns with a bunker full of jars. Yeah, it's bird flu, clown zombies, aliens. Now ain't that grand in the Ozarks? Preppers, hillbillies got a plan, man, got a plan. Joe grabbed a mask and old gas can and locked up tight his cellar door. Ready himself as any good man for a funky cosmic war. The clowns marched on with red balloon, honking noses, eyes aglow. Bird flu spread from dusk till noon. Joe steeled for the show. It's bird flu, clown zombies, aliens invade from Mars. Prepper Joe's ready in his long johns with a bunker full of jars. Yeah, it's bird flu, clown zombies, aliens. Now ain't that grand in the Ozarks? Preppers, hillbillies got a plan, man, got a plan.
All right, that was awesome. Praxis made that video, y'all, and y'all need to give him a hand because that is really, really cool. Sorry about the little echo. I think we got it locked down. That was on my end. How's everybody doing tonight?
Fine over here.
Sounded good.
Doing
okay,
great.
Cool.
Yeah.
Have a happy Friday, everybody. Welcome back to the Friday Night Prepper Pre-Party Show. We are down. One panelist today was having some audio. We're actually just popped into the backstage. Let me see if we can get you back in there, Wayne.
Cool.
All right. Did we get you back, Wayne?
Hey, Zach.
All right.
Cool. Awesome. So we're just getting started. We have a fun one planned for you tonight. We're gonna kind of keep this loose. We'll do our best to keep our eye on chat. So if you got a question or something that you want to throw out there for discussion, throw it in caps. We'll try to catch it. And if we miss it, I apologize. As usual, we try to keep it fairly clean here. You know, be kind to each other. Basically, that's the biggest thing. Don't be racist. Don't be sexist. Don't be a jerk. Other than that, let's have some fun. And I want to say thanks to the mods. I know a few of them are already here helping out, so I appreciate you guys. And thank you so much to the panelists for joining me. Make sure you guys check out all their channels. I've got it linked in their description, I believe, so you should be able to go right into there at some point during this video. Click on their name, go over, check out their channel, and please subscribe. It's the only thing I can really do for them because they're not being paid. They're giving their time freely.
What?
Thanks, Sarge.
I had a different understanding, Sarge.
Sorry about that. If I led you to believe that, I was just trying to get you in here. All right, we got a lot of stuff to discuss here, so let's just go ahead and get started. So what got me started on this, I think I was probably like 12 years old. Now, of course, I always grew up on like Star Trek and Star Wars and that kind of stuff. I was a big sci-fi and sci-fantasy fan. So I always liked the idea of that maybe the universe wasn't just us. But the book that really like pushed me over the top into this and also scared the crap out of me was Communion by Whitley Strieber. Have any of you guys read that one?
Yeah. As soon as you were building it up, talking about the one that scared the crap out of you, that's the book that popped in my head.
Yeah. So if you are interested in aliens and you are not afraid of nightmares, read that book. It's one of the few books that actually did give me nightmares. It's really.
What's it called, Sarge?
Communion by Whitley Strieber.
Yeah. There's a film based on it too. It's got what's his face? That guy with the voice that everyone always. Christopher Walken.
Christopher Walken. Yeah, I don't think the film is as good as the book.
No,
personally.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's about the author claims it's a true story and that he's been abducted multiple times, and one of the scariest aspects of it is that these aliens would basically come into his room at nighttime and he couldn't move. Like they basically could freeze him. He had no will to put up any kind of fight of his own. And they would take him away to their ship, and then they would probe him anally. So my first question for the panel is, what's with the
Definitely
anal
a
probes?
nightmare.
Like, what is with these anal probes? Like, why are they fascinated by our butts?
It's just checking your temperature.
I guess. Anybody?
I mean, you got to start somewhere, right?
I guess.
It's a great way to kick things off, Sarge.
Maybe we're like the red light district for them, you know, and like they come here for a good time. I don't know.
Well, it's probably why that Air Force officer back in the 70s shot at him when he claimed that a flying saucer came over and tried to abduct him and his wife.
Yep. I mean, I could understand people wanting to put up a fight for sure. So ET seems to be fascinated with our butts. I don't know, but let's get a little bit more serious though. Roswell is probably the big thing that got a lot of Americans interested in this topic, right? So most people out there in the audience should be familiar with the Roswell incident where a UFO crashed in Roswell, New Mexico, and lots of witnesses saw this. And the papers confirmed that it was a crashed UFO with, I think the language they used was like 3 beings were inside. And then the next day, another paper, they completely changed the story. They had a picture of 3 military guys with a weather balloon and said, no, it was just a weather balloon. There's no crashed UFO, that kind of thing. But the people there from Roswell, New Mexico, who saw this, say the picture that you see in the newspaper looks nothing like what they saw. So, for my panel,
Big surprise.
yeah, what are your thoughts on Roswell?
One of us
Anybody.
talking? Okay. Well, I'll jump in. I think that given the circumstances that surround, what was reportedly going down there, that kind of thing, the only real way to explain everything that's documented that was reported and then was reported a different way, kind of seems to be that there was something that happened and then the story got officially changed, because it's hard to wrap your mind around some way that all the facts that we know about that, about witnesses saying this and it was first reported as this, it's hard to imagine that accidentally all those things coming about without it having been precipitated by something other than a weather balloon. That's my feeling on it.
So Southern, I have to throw that up there. Southern Prepper says Joe Rogan's new special addresses the anal probe question. I will go watch Joe Rogan's special. From the Roswell incident, of us 5, do any of you think it was space aliens?
Oh yeah, I think this tech has been around for thousands of years, and they just don't let the peasants know about it.
Okay.
I think we got wormholes and all kinds of stuff.
That's what I think part of it is. I think part of it's ancient tech that they found, and also there is stuff flying around and crashing. But I don't know why they'd want to come here, because we're kind of like the ghetto of the universe.
Right.
Yeah, and that's a good question to bring up too. Like, if you were an advanced species, what would be on Earth that would be interesting to you, other than like we may look like really interesting animals or insects or something, right? It's hard to imagine that they would have a lot of interest in interacting with us or helping us, even as long as we behave the way that we do, which is we like to destroy each other for resources. So I'm going to throw out another theory that was out there. When for the larger part of my life, I believed that Roswell probably was like a crashed UFO with some type of aliens, whether it be space aliens or interdimensional. We'll get into some of this stuff a little bit later on. I don't really know if anybody knows the answer to this kind of thing, or anybody, the civilian or the public anyways. But there was another theory that was thrown out a few years ago that I think is worth mentioning. And it's impossible to prove or disprove, but there was a person who claimed that the whole Roswell incident was a staged thing, that Russia had crashed this thing with mutated children to really mess with the United States. And then there was another theory that came out that, well, no, the United States orchestrated this to convince Russia that we had some kind of advanced tech, right? Which maybe we do or maybe we don't. I don't know. Like, it's one of those things that the further this rabbit hole goes, that's harder and harder to prove. But do all 5 of us agree that the weather balloon was probably not what was actually seen that day?
Yeah. I think that's pretty much all you can know for certain is what it wasn't, because the official theory doesn't make any sense. But yeah, it's hard to know what it was.
Seems to be the story with all kinds of things.
Yes, it does.
It's like when people see Bigfoot and then they're all like, "Oh no, you really saw a bear." Like, they look a little different.
Yeah. The cryptoids, is that what they call them?
Cryptozoology is what they call it. Yeah.
And Mrs. Sarge is a little bit more into the Bigfoot thing than I am. She probably could, and a friend of ours is as well. They could speak to it a lot. I don't know a lot about that lore, but I was going to get to this later, but I'm going to throw it up there since Southern Tier Prepper brought it up. So one of the theories, and there's a professor in North Carolina, Dr. Diana Pasulka, who you can find her on YouTube. There's a lot of interviews with her. She's actually really interesting to listen to. She wrote a book called American Cosmic. And she talks a lot about the religious possibilities for this, that maybe what people think they're seeing as aliens is angels or demons, or maybe what people thought was angels and demons is aliens, right? Like, it could go either way. Right. I'm not a huge fan of this theory, but I wanted to throw it up for discussion. I like her, though. Like, she's really interesting to listen to. But what do you all think about that theory?
So many ancient civilizations seem to worship gods that seem to come in spacecraft.
Or from the sky in any event, yeah.
Right.
There seems to be a lot of ancient art that indicates that, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Chariots in the sky and that kind of thing.
Well, there's a fascination, and it's almost universal. I mean, you have the Germanic and the Norse. I use those terms interchangeably. They have a fascination with the number 9 planets, 9 gods, 9. You know, they come from other planets. There's a Rainbow Bridge. You have the Navajo and the Hopi that have their beliefs on it as well, and including some stuff in the Bible. And just about every religion has either a belief or stories of something interstellar in it.
Are you guys familiar with the Sumerian tales of the Anunnaki?
Mm-hmm.
That, you know, that's one of the other theories, right? That we were maybe a seeded planet, that we were created by another species for slave labor or whatever, and then
adding or taking away a DNA way back then.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that one for me is, and this kind of gets into, for those of you guys who like Giorgio Tsoukalos, is that how you pronounce his name? Ancient Aliens on TV, talking about that kind of stuff. And somebody mentioned Globeki Techie in here, Burpee Yoga Uncle, that there's definitely ruins on this planet that are difficult to explain, right? Like, they're perfectly cut with tools that shouldn't have existed then, and that kind of thing, or they appear to be made with tools that shouldn't have existed then. But the Anunnaki story from ancient Sumeria is one of the oldest cultures in the world, maybe the oldest culture in the world. And they were fairly advanced for what we would think of for thousands of years ago. They had cities and music and language and an alphabet and a government. And a lot of their stories speak of their rulers as these Anunnaki. There's stories in them that sound very much like gods, right? The Enki and Enlil. Rural, you're nodding. Do you know a little bit more about this? Do you want to speak to it a little bit?
Well, and I kind of went down when I was kind of doing my homework on this, of all the different theories and everything, because, you know, the term alien just basically is it's foreign to us. You know, if you don't know what something is, it's alien to you. And to sit there and watch everybody's kind of different rabbit hole about we're a seeded planet. They even went in so far as going in and saying that they seed us and then they take the best of us. That's why some of these stars die, you know, mysteriously so young. They're snatching them and putting them on their planet. But they've gone down so many different rabbit holes on any of the stuff, especially when you start getting into, like you were saying with the Anunnaki, that you actually have it to where it's almost like, was we seeded from them, or did they come down to visit? Because I've seen both sides of that story.
And there was another species that's mentioned in those stories too, right? That rebelled against the Anunnaki.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember the name of that?
I do not.
Okay, I don't either. They're described as much larger than humans, and they were their slave species, and then they rebelled, and then supposedly humans were put into place to replace that slave species because we were more easily controlled.
Mm-hmm.
Do I have that right?
Yeah, basic.
Okay. Nerdy Prepper, Treasurer Investor, thank you so much for the super chat. I appreciate that.
I'm always a little bit wary of stories that are kind of on the old side, especially when they get to be thousands of years old, because you'll have a story that even happened a couple of weeks ago, and it tends to get embellished and embellished. And I'm always just a little wary of anything that has an oral tradition to it. So that's always something that kind of crosses through my mind whenever there's something that was passed down in that way. Is how much was this exaggerated for entertainment value, or to turn into clickbait? I suppose ancient clickbait.
Mm-hmm. And Burpee Yoga Uncle mentions that every ancient religion has a story of a great flood, which is true. I would say that that's probably something that did happen. Now, did it cover the whole earth? I don't know. Did it cover that portion of the world? We're talking about like Northern Africa area. It seems possible, if all these different religions are talking about it. And, we talk about things like Atlantis and stuff like that. Maybe Atlantis existed and that's how we lost Atlantis. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of that goes back to the Younger Dryas event 12,500 years ago or 12,900 years ago, depending on how you calculate it. There seems to have been a world before that, and I believe that there were ancient societies. I think all the pyramids and all the stuff in South America, Malaysia, Angkor Wat, I think all that stuff was built back then. The catastrophe happened, and then the people that inhabited it later on were tribal people that found it. Like what we see in South America with the Aztecs and the Mayans, how they kind of think that those are tribes that moved in, that they actually didn't build it. And I think that was a global event.
So you think humanity goes back much? Is that what you're saying? That humanity goes back much further than we think?
Yeah, I think it goes back much further, and I think there's a lot of technology from the old world that's completely different from ours that we'll probably never fully understand. And I think maybe that technology also has something to do with these UFOs that are flying around.
Mm-hmm. And I've heard people say that the pyramids are much older than we think. That it wasn't the time period that's usually taught in the history books. That they think that they're even much older than that. Is that kind of what you're talking about too?
Yeah, because if you take a lot of people are trying to they're focused on trying to figure it out, but they don't look at what we don't know.
Right.
And what we do know happens over time. So we know that happens over time. Everything deteriorates except for what we leave in stone. If we all just vanish one day, 5,000 years from now, there won't be computer chips, there won't be metal cars, all that stuff will rust and deteriorate away, and the only thing there will be is 4 heads on a mountain.
Silurian hypothesis, is that what you're talking about?
Not sure. I haven't heard it.
Have you ever heard that? So the Silurian hypothesis, as I understand it, is that they talk about like all the species on the Earth have kind of gone through several cycles here of mass extinction, and that the Silurian hypothesis is basically it's a made up word. It's not a real thing, but that there would have been a species humanoid that existed prior to one of these mass extinctions, and that these things that you're talking about that we find, whether it be UFOs or maybe even the pyramids or something like that, are remnants of that, and that maybe even Atlantis was something from that.
Yeah, it's kind of along those lines. I mean, you can never be 100% sure, but I think that's kind of where things are leaning.
Mm-hmm.
the way that things are built with a lot of these ancient sites is just people didn't do it with levers and ropes and pulleys, and it just didn't happen that way. And I think we've done enough experimentation over the last 100 years to figure out that's not what happened.
I think the one thing that we can be sure about when it comes down to pretty much everything that people think that they know about the world is that people don't tend to really know nearly as much as they think that they know. We always think that whatever our understanding of the world is, and by we I mean societally, whatever our understanding of the world is at this moment, that we feel like that's crystallized and that's the correct interpretation. You rewind 50 years and there's all sorts of things that people used to think were true that we've now have found out that that aren't the case. And the one certainty we can really have about looking into our past or into our future or into the nature of the world as it is right now is that it's full of uncertainties. And I think people oftentimes will gloss over that and forget that we don't really know nearly as much as we think we know. And there is a lot of mystery and there is a lot of unknowns. And 100 years from now, there's all sorts of crazy ideas we have in our head now that we take for granted that they'll look back and be like, that was ridiculous. How could people have thought that? Because we just presume that we had knowledge that we didn't necessarily have. And scientists are guilty of that just as much as regular people, I think.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think that when we look at concepts that are coming out in quantum physics, right, like superposition and wave collapse theory, basically short version of this, I'm not a physicist, I'm not the best person to explain this, but superposition basically is you are, if you took a cat, I'll use the Schrodinger's cat explanation because that's probably the easiest way to do it. Took a cat, put it in a box with a piece of degrading radioactive material, and you close the box. Before you open that box, the cat is both alive and dead at the same time. That's superposition. And we know through quantum physics that that is true, but we don't understand it or why it works or why mathematically that's true. And in 100 years, maybe that will be like simple 2 + 2, right? That they'll look back at us and they'll be like, well, that was so basic, right? And there's much, much deeper layers to that. Now, the quantum physics gets really, really weird. You've got quantum entanglement where two particles that are entangled together, separated by millions and millions of miles, can somehow communicate with each other, which is faster than the speed of light. So it shouldn't be possible. Mathematically, it's possible, and they don't understand why, right? So all this stuff, maybe in 100 years, 500 years, 1,000 years, that will be like basic math to them if we live that long.
Yeah, and if our brains are even capable of understanding the universe. I think that's another arrogance that people have, is that we're under the impression that however the universe is designed, that the meat inside of our heads is actually capable of comprehending it. I mean, we could be like an ant, no matter how much you train an ant, it's never going to be able to understand pretty much anything. And it's not just a matter of the ant needs more time to learn this stuff. It's not physically capable of grasping concepts in its mind because it doesn't have enough mind. And that could easily be the case with us in the universe. It is just so beyond the ability of this meat to comprehend it. We just can't physically do it. It's just it will never be possible for us.
Yeah, there's physical limitations. The question that I would pose to that is, what happens if the ant is allowed to evolve for 5 billion years?
Well, then it's not an ant anymore. Then it's something different. And if we evolve, then we'd be something different. But as we are right now, we might just not be physically capable of conceptualizing this stuff.
I think that's true. I want to circle back to that Tuck by V in a little bit. I don't know a whole lot about the Lush and adrenochrome thing. Does anybody want to try to tackle that one?
I was going to say something there a minute ago. I'm sorry about
harvesting
again.
Energy.
You were talking about the ant evolving over all these millions of years. But what if humans or aliens came and altered their genetic patterns and changed their DNA to do something different? Mm-hmm. And also, I think that our tech is probably a lot closer to things of that extreme nature than we realize or will ever be told. But yeah, you can alter the DNA and create this whatever you want.
Yeah. If we changed what was up here, who knows what's possible? You're right.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that kind of gets into one of the areas where I was going to get with this is there's another professor, I think he's from Harvard, Dr. Michael Masters, I believe. His theory on what we're seeing with these Tic Tac UFOs and the spherical UFOs and these claims from these whistleblowers that the government has these biological beings, is that his claim is that somehow in the future, he calls it the crypto-terrestrial theory or crypto-terrestrial hypothesis. Sorry. Sometime in the future, millions and billions of years in the future, what you're seeing, these little gray aliens with the big eyes, the kind of the stereotypical gray alien, that those are actually humans that have, like, if we live long enough or once was humans, as you were saying, Praxis, right? They're not really, their DNA has changed so much that could you really even call them human anymore, but they'd be basically our descendants. And that because of what I was talking about before with the quantum physics, somehow they figure out how to wormhole and they're coming back to study us, just maybe they're curious about us. They want some DNA samples for their zoo. I don't know.
There are messed up mutated kids.
Yeah. And that it goes back to what Tuck was saying earlier. This ties into that theory is that there's like these self-replicating under ocean machines or whatever. That's where these UFOs might be coming from. Of course, that could also be the ancient Silurian hypothesis kind of thing Wayne and I were talking about a minute ago. Hard to say. But what do y'all think about that theory? That's the one I think that resonates because I'm a big fan of quantum physics and that kind of stuff. I watch videos on it and I nerd out on it. And that's the one I think that resonates for me more than like space aliens coming from another planet. That maybe somehow we've survived. Despite all of our efforts to destroy ourselves and our planet, somehow we survive. We go underground or we go to the moon or something. We, somehow humans survive. And then billions and billions of years later, this is what we look like. We've basically all look like these little clones and very hard to distinguish from each other. We've got this like a gray skin. Our nose has basically devolved. Our ears have basically devolved. Our heads have enlarged, and we're kind of gangly and don't really have much muscle structure. From the standpoint of like anthropology, the likelihood that something that we're finding, like these little gray aliens, would be from another planet as opposed to like a humanoid primate type shapes seems unlikely, as opposed to like something that's from this planet, either like what Wayne was saying, like it's always been here, or it's from the future and coming back. What do you guys think about that?
It'd be a pretty big coincidence for the layout of the body to be so similar without there having been some sort of similar origin. So in that way, regarding the biology, I think that makes sense. But outside the biology itself, personally, I feel like if you're just looking at the tech, the craft and things like that, I think either theory is as plausible as the other. But certainly, if you're looking at the bodies, it is strange that people always depict these as humanoid. The word's right there, humid, right in the core of it.
Yeah.
Well, I found that interesting while you were talking. I'm sitting here trying to picture this out, and it kind of struck me that these are future-oid people, and we are basically the field trip of their elementary school. But to devolve, I mean, you're kind of putting it into the media thing of, think of the movie Wall-E. They couldn't walk, they couldn't move, they couldn't, and that's supposed to be a futuristic thing. What's another 1,000 years, 2,000 years of that where tech has got it so much we don't need to move around, we don't need to do all that stuff. So I can see that as being plausible.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else on that one?
Well, on the opposite end of that would be they lost their ears and their brains got so much bigger. They didn't need their ears because of more higher sensitivity. But then that would also cause a need for a larger brain because otherwise you'd get overrun by senses.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my only issue with that theory is like I'm fascinated by the quantum physics and stuff of it, like you are, even though it's beyond me. I don't understand it at all, the math and everything. The Greys themselves, if they were humans that evolved, from my standpoint, with working all over the world and going to school for anthropology and history, from an anthropological and historical standpoint, humans are too greedy, and tribal, to ever come together in peace and move forward and evolve like that. Somebody would always want to steal the technology or make money off of it, or he's like, you look at some of these corrupt governments that, in the past that just want to control people and everything else, and I just don't think we could evolve in that way. I think we're too tribal for that.
We're pretty young too, though. I mean, as a species, give us 60 million years, who knows what can be possible.
I'd like to think that eventually we are able to become more peaceful. I don't know that necessarily for me means like we're all united under one world banner, but that we find different. I don't know. In the future, maybe we found different ways to resolve our differences or something. So all that stuff is we're just speculating. But it's in some ways it's the future human. The what do you call it? Crypto-terrestrial hypothesis. The future human thought is comforting to me in that maybe somehow we figured it out and we survive. But it's also disturbing in that, like, why are they screwing with us? Like, so if we're their ancient ancestors, right? Why come back and anally probe us? Why screw with the cows? Why not just like, introduce yourself and say, hey, we're maybe I guess it screws with the timeline or something. You can get into that kind of speculation, but it's just weird. Like, why? Because there seems to be almost like a cruelty to these abductions that the people who are saying that they're getting abducted, that there is like almost a torture element to it. And maybe that's not the intent. Maybe it's medical. Maybe it's curiosity. I don't know. Because it's how do you understand a brain that's so foreign from a human brain? Right, like how does a human understand the brain of an ant or a whale? Right, like it's so different. But there does seem to be like this cruelty to it, right? And I know humans, you could say, well, we're cruel to everything. Like we're cruel to the planet, we're cruel to animals, we're cruel to each other. So maybe it is us.
I don't know. That entire time, it just all of a sudden popped up that this is like the teenage of the aliens are coming down, doing graffiti in our crops and messing with the animals, and they're like, how do we mess with the humans? I know.
What would be the most invasive thing we could do to really screw with them?
Or just something twisted like that's how they make their sex toys and we're just a factory.
Yeah, it's just weird.
That's the ultimate Bohica moment.
This is exactly where I knew this conversation was going to go when it's a prepping for Sarge combo.
That's right. All right, so back to the space aliens thing, though, right? So just curious, out of the five of us, do you guys think that life exists outside of Earth?
Intelligent or just bacteria?
We'll just say life at first. It could be like bacterial,
The expanse
small cellular.
The expanse is so huge that the possibilities are quite possible. I couldn't imagine it not being. Possibility.
Yeah, it would seem pretty far-fetched otherwise, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm. What about intelligent life that it evolves? Let's say not even like humanoid, right? But let's say as smart as a whale, something like that.
Again, there's a lot of things on this planet that went that far too.
Yeah, I definitely think there's other intelligent life out there. It's, I think it's just human arrogance in a vast universe to think that we're the only ones here.
If it was just us on this planet and it was like us and say mice or us and a bunch of bacteria level things, I guess maybe you could speculate that intelligence is a really unusual thing to manifest. You can have lots of life, but it almost never turns into something intelligent. But there are just so many routes to intelligence on this planet. You mentioned whales, dolphins, dogs and wolves, are headed that way. And even completely separate paths that aren't even mammalian. You get cephalopods like octopus that have an enormous amount of, and they arose up from clams. So it seems like intelligence of some sort is something that is inherent in life. And life almost seems kind of inherent in geology, because life arose, it seems, so quickly on this planet as soon as the conditions were possible for it. It didn't take that much long, geologically speaking, for it to pop up. So it seems both life and intelligence are things that seem to regularly arise from the natural environment.
If anybody's an alien, it's definitely octopus.
Yes. Yeah.
They're super interesting. They are super interesting.
Yeah.
They're slightly terrifying.
Yeah, they can change their shape. They can change their color patterns. They can actually leave the ocean for a little while, for a short period of time. They're incredible hunters.
And reasoning intelligence, too.
Mm-hmm. They can solve small puzzles. They recognize human divers when humans go down into the ocean. Like they'll recognize the same diver, not just that it's a human, but like it's a diver that they've met before. There's something really, really interesting about octopuses, and if there's ever a creature that would be a candidate for like maybe that's not from this planet, that would be one.
Yeah, it's weird to think they arose from clams too. Something that it almost is more like a plant than an animal when you're at a clam level.
Yeah. They're I've watched a bunch of documentaries and science stuff on them. Their intelligence is just slightly terrifying. If they were another notch up the food chain, then
give them another billion years and let's see what happens.
Yeah. I heard a couple of years ago that there are squid that are starting to fly a little bit, like flying fish. Like they'll get up out of the water and flap a little bit. I mean, it's not much of a flight,
but they'll get out of the water.
Yeah, it's like they're on their way. A few million years in the future, we'll be like, oh yeah, it's a squid flying up there.
And to go back to what you were saying, Praxis, a little while ago about the evolution of intelligence on this planet, there are little what do you call like primates that are together? Is it like a clan? Like what do they call them when they band together?
I think it depends on the species. Monkeys are called a troop. And
a troop. Okay,
all sorts of weird names for all the different kinds.
So let's go with troop for the
baboons is Congress.
Okay.
Baboons. A group of baboons is called a Congress.
A Congress. Okay.
Yeah.
So
let's go with that. That sounds classier.
So what's really interesting is that there's certain primates that when one of them learns how to use a tool, very quickly the entire Congress or troop will also learn it. So there's like this concept of networking, community, and so in some of these Congress or troops, because I don't know the terminology for all the primates, that they're watching and they're monitoring, like they're almost like entering the Stone Age.
Yeah. Another interesting thing about our own history is the idea that there were other kind of humanoids back, when we were kind of evolving. And a lot of those kind of, we talk about they didn't make it, they died out, the Neanderthals, interbred with us, and we've got genes in us. I've got a few of their genes in myself. But, I think probably one of the reasons that a lot of those intelligent creatures died out wasn't just they happened to die out, but that, the humanoids, the smartest ones in the room at the time, were, threatened by the ones that were kind of a little too close for comfort. And, we probably, pushed those back into the shadows, so to speak. So, life might have evolved a lot more intelligent species on this planet had the human, and again, this is just speculation on my part, but had the humans not possibly maybe, had a role in making sure that we almost have like a fire break between us and the nearest intelligence. And I tend to think we might have made that fire break.
Yeah. Yeah. Eliminated competition and interbred with it too.
Yeah.
They say there's a lot of well, not a lot. There's Neanderthal DNA that's within humans that's still present, that most people have like a tiny percentage, but there's a few people out there that have like up to 5% Neanderthal DNA.
Yeah. I don't know my percentage.
No, I don't either.
No, I wasn't asking.
I know when they did my family did the 23andMe, there was like 2% unknown.
Oh, okay.
So that answers the question, doesn't it?
I guess so. The gray aliens in there.
That's right. Or a lizard person.
Yeah, right.
I think these lizard persons are running our world, our governments around the world.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a stretch for me. I know a lot of people say that, and it's a terrifying thought, right? So let's just play with it for a minute, right?
It's a terrifying thought just to think that humans treat each other the way they do, like that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But to where you mentioned, you didn't say it this way, but the spirit of Cain, where Cain killed his own brother.
Mm-hmm.
But that's like, we almost need both of those things in our life to see the opposite sides of things, to be able to really be questioning of things.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you could have dystopia if you lost, that spirit of Cain, but
I agree with you. I think, how would we know what good looks like if we didn't have the opposite? Right. And I know I missed a few questions in here, so I appreciate the chat. I'm doing my best to try to keep up with it. Nerdy Prepper Treasure Investor, thank you again. I appreciate the super chat. Thank you so much. David
Nerdy Prepper is one of mine. I don't know if Nerdy Prepper is on anyone else's channel, but I know Nerdy Prepper. Thanks for showing up.
David Paulides is a published author, film producers, and he has an awesome channel on YouTube, Canum Missing Project. He presents factual evidence about unusual missing person cases. Awesome. Thank you. We will definitely check that out. Appreciate it. And I just want to kind of scroll through here for a second, see if I missed any big questions. I know Lee had one for you, Praxis, but I didn't understand the context of it. Because I'm rolling a little slow on it. It was so Lee, if you want to repeat your question, it was something about is something that he said, was it known or unknown? Yeah. So Steve's question here, they see us as lab rats. I mean, that would be a fair explanation of why they screw with us, right? Maybe they're experimenting on us.
Yeah, these aliens, they call themselves gods, and they're just taking advantage. They're calling for another reset.
Are you talking about the lizard people?
Yeah, or the aliens.
Or either, yeah. So
they're looking to make you forget about as far as we've come. You know what I mean? Again, with the tech thing, I think it's so more advanced than they want us to ever know, and we're getting close. So it's time for another reset.
So I think when I think about what most people would say is lizard people, and some people would call Illuminati, I would say is the Bilderberg group for me. And these are kind of your puppet masters. These are the people that are pulling strings on governments. In fact, if you guys watch the Y-Files, if anybody watches the Y-Files, that's a fantastic channel. He just did a deep dive into the Bilderberg group. And I hope that he remembered to say that he's not suicidal and he would never hurt himself, because it's not the kind of people you want to like get the wrong attention to. And I tend to think so I get frustrated when there's things that are obviously an injustice in the world, right? We talk about this sometimes on my channel, and I'll get frustrated and I'll get a little fired up, and the audience thinks it's funny, but I'm really fired up. And apathy is like a pet peeve of mine. I don't like apathy in people. And the struggle for me is accepting that we are very easily controlled with a little bit of distraction and a little bit of numbingness, right? So when we have tools like TikTok and certain medications and maybe even like pop stars and sports, you would even like think about this. As long as the bread and circuses are flowing, nobody cares about what's happening, right? Nobody cares about these injustices in the world. And so what people would say is like lizard people. That's how I conceptualize it. I don't necessarily think they're actually lizard people, but that's probably something that a lizard person would say.
Well, we have a reptilian part of our brain, and I guess some people might operate from there more than other parts. So I suppose you could use that as a definition, working anyway.
Yes. Let me see. I'm going to scroll forward here a little bit. If I miss your questions, I'm so sorry, guys. I know there's a lot of good chat flowing. I did want to talk about the grays a little bit more. So this tends to be the ones that most people see, right? Or they claim to have seen, is these encounters with these gray aliens. They're short. They're really skinny. They got the big heads. They got the big dark eyes, right? So their behavior when people describe them, have encounters with them, is they're really unusual. They seem to be able to kind of communicate inside your mind to some extent. But then other people like David Grusch and the Whistleblowers and stuff have said that the people who've had actual like encounters with them, like government or military contractors, say that like they die really quickly when they're in captivity, and when they're asked questions like where you're from, they don't really give a logical answer. And there's different theories about this. Have you guys heard of any of this stuff, and what are your thoughts on like what those are, the gray aliens, or what they could be?
Could be that they breathe a different gas mixture, not as much oxygen, too much oxygen, or something like that.
That's why they would die so quick.
Too much nitrogen. Our air is like 95% nitrogen or something.
Maybe.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
I personally don't know what to think about
Yeah.
the whole topic. It's one of those things where there's a fair bit of information floating around, and it's just really hard to tell what's credible or not. Maybe some of it is, maybe some of it isn't. Well, it's kind of like Bigfoot. We mentioned Bigfoot a little bit earlier. I worked for the Discovery Channel for one summer. They don't pay very well. And we went looking for Bigfoot up in Northern California. I thought it was just like, looking for ghosts or whatever. When I was up there, I actually came to the conclusion that I actually think there probably is some kind of a large ape up there. It seemed like the most logical explanation to explain, a lot of, the evidence that's around there. That said, I would say that probably the majority of Bigfoot evidence is probably fake. It's probably people making up stories, people making tracks and things like that. And I think that the gray alien thing is probably kind of like that, where there might be some real, actual data in there, but it's just so hard to sift it out from all the chaff.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody might have ate some bad mushrooms.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of explanations for it.
Yeah.
Is the thing.
Well, let's get into, since you're talking about that, let's get into the interdimensional stuff, because that gets really freaky too.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna get real layman's with this for people who might not have ever heard of this stuff. So there's a drug called DMT that comes from you have some of it in your brain actually. Everybody has a little bit in their brain, and supposedly when you die, it gets released into your bloodstream. But it also is produced in other sources. There's a tree root in South America. I think it's the mimosa tree. Can be produced from there. And there's a frog that secretes it on its back. So people take this as a spiritual drug. It's not really considered like a fun recreational kind of high like marijuana or anything like that. People will take it as a spiritual journey drug. And many people who've taken it have talked about encountering these entities. Like basically they get blasted into the hypersphere and see colors that we don't see, like these like different spectrum of colors and that kind of thing. And then they have these encounters very briefly. It's like less than 15 minutes with these entities. And they're described in different ways, but often it's like they're like elf-like or jovial. They're pranksters. They seem to have fun with the person that's interacting with them. And the reports that I've read on this, I've never done it. I'm a little scared of something like that. But people who've done it have said that once you blast through that, like it's like you're blasting through space kind of thing. And then when you get to the location where these entities are, they said it feels as lucid, more real than the world that we're living in. It feels more real than that. It's really interesting stuff. I don't know if like it's just your mind just like, hey, you're high as a kite, buddy. Let's have some fun. But the people who experience this are like really, determined that like, hey, no, this is a real thing. These entities exist. You guys have any thoughts on that, or do you know anyone that's done it and you're willing to speak to that? Or
I've known some people who have done that, and they seemed as convinced as the people that you discuss. But the data that you get out of that would just, in my feeling, would just be so unreliable in a way. For data to be useful, it has to be from some kind of an experiment that is reproducible by other people, and I suppose that is reproducible by other people, but it's hard to quantify anything because it's just all so experiential. It's all just qualitative. So I don't feel comfortable navigating or making guesses when the information's so soft on something like that.
Sure. Anybody else? Anybody that's known anybody that's done it that's willing to speak to it?
So like you mentioned, there's a number of drugs that do that. One of them is peyote in the Southwest, and my wife is Navajo. She has extended family. It's traditional Navajo, and I've spoken to and been in a lot of ceremonies and talked to medicine men that do it. And they describe similar things when they use it for a ceremony, how basically they go off Earth. He described it as going off Earth and speaking to the angels and stuff. So I didn't get too deep into it, but that is about as far as when I was talking to one of the medicine men. He was talking to me about that and telling me that's what basically happens is he has an out-of-body experience. He leaves the Earth, goes off somewhere up into space, and then speaks to angels.
It's interesting.
It's very interesting. I know I can't speak to specifics because of confidentiality. I have many patients who have tried ketamine and have talked about experiencing like definitely different dimensional experiences, but none of them spoke about entities with theirs. And I don't know, maybe it's just like that's not the right chemical for it, or they didn't go far enough into it, you know?
I don't know anything like drug-wise, but to kind of tie it together, I think his name was Phil Schneider. He was at government engineer somewhere down in New Mexico in the late 70s, I believe. But he was saying that he actually helped in the experiments and different things that they came across extraterrestrials, and they were doing interdimensional travel. They had some sort of a peace deal. They were all jovial and friendly and all that. So I can see where that kind of ties together.
Mm-hmm. So there is that. I mean, we don't know, right? Like quantum physics suggests that there's other dimensions, but we can't prove it, at least yet, you know. And so if there's other dimensions, and we've all pretty much say here that the universe that we know, the physical universe that we know in this dimension is so big that the five of us all agree that life probably exists elsewhere, right? So if there's other dimensions, then I think that logic also follows. And I don't, you know, I've heard 11, and I've heard other theories have mentioned more than 11 dimensions. And like you said before, Praxis, like how do we even know yet? Like there's knowledge that we can't even fathom yet, right? So let's say it's an infinite number of dimensions, right? Just to play with it for a minute. Then that also exponentially increases the likelihood that there's some other type of life out there, if that exists, right? If there's such a thing as other dimensions.
Paranormal.
Mm-hmm. And then it starts getting into like, now I have had some paranormal experiences. I've never, to my knowledge, I've never encountered what would be most people would call an alien. I have had paranormal experiences, and I've talked about them on other streams where I worked in a house that was haunted, and it was witnessed not just by me, but by coworkers. So we know what we know. That experience was very real. Don't have a good explanation for it other than doors could slam shut on their own. People could feel somebody behind them. Strange stuff.
Yeah. We've had some weird things at our house too.
Sleep paralysis is sometimes an explanation for it, but we were awake.
I've had sleep paralysis a couple times where
you saw the boo
you
hag?
wake up from a nap, but it's like something's holding you down.
Yeah,
that is terrifying.
Yeah, it's gonna be creepy.
Yeah, so there's different names for it in different cultures, right? Like here in the Gullah Geechee community, they'll call it the boo hag. That she sits on your chest, basically. And then I've heard other people describe a hat man, a succubus, a hat man, shadow people, right?
I often think there's a young child ghost in my house. It's pretty wild. It always feels like there's a infant, a 3-year-old, trying to crawl up on the bed or something. It's like, well, what in the hell is that?
Have other people experienced?
No, but I heard stories of a mother and a child here before I started experiencing that.
That they describe something similar?
Yes. Yeah.
Interesting. Yes, Praxis has, in addition to that cool music video that you guys saw at the beginning of this, Praxis has an alien invasion series that everybody should definitely check out. It's a lot of fun. Is that still up?
Yeah, it's still up.
Available. Okay.
People don't tend to watch it. I was going to do the 3rd season this spring, but I busted my ankle, and I think I'm going to have to wait till next year to wrap it up. But
Gotcha.
It's going to be 3 seasons in the end.
Awesome. Alison Silverland, thank you for sharing that. She said, when I smoked DMT, I didn't leave my body like most people, but I did see a being in the room with me made of colorful fractals with very, very intense energy. The machine elves are real, I'm sure. And yeah, and I've heard people call them machine elves. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Alice.
I've always heard that there's some kind of a connection with water with that as well. Like people will have different kinds of experiences, whether they're proximal to water when they do it. Again, this is all secondhand for me, but I always thought that was kind of interesting because that gets into that experimentation where you can, test something out and have different people kind of report different experiences based on their environment. It seems like you're kind of prodding with, getting real data out of it that way.
Absolutely. All right, let me scroll ahead here just a little bit. Okay. So we're getting near the end here. I got a couple more questions, and the last one's a good one for us preppers. But before I get to that last one, as we talk about all these things, the interdimensional creatures, the possibility of future humans or very, very ancient past humans, possibility of seeding, right? Like that our planet was seeded, space visitors, all of these different things that could be possible explanations. And we also know another possible explanation. We can't rule out that this is just the government screwing with people, right? Like that's also a very likely scenario that there's, companies like Boeing and Lockheed Martin have these really crazy craft that they haven't really mass revealed. They haven't been declassified. They're just messing with technology to try to, maybe it's going to be used in a future war. Maybe it's not, who knows? But that's another possibility, is that when people see these UFOs, that it's just either the government or the military industrial contractors are just like doing their thing. And people see it and they're like, well, I've never seen a plane like that, so that's got to be a UFO. We can't rule that out, right? In fact, logic says that's probably the most likely scenario, right? If you're going to use Occam's razor on this.
Yeah.
It's not sexy, though. But I want to know what you guys think about like the media's influence on this, and how does the not just like news, but movies and things like that, and even books and magazines and things like that, video games, how does that shape how we are possibly framing that in our brain, how we're perceiving things?
Well, I guess I could take that one. I've always worked in media. That was kind of my first job, and I think media acts as kind of the story creators, the myth creators for our culture. And we mentioned earlier the idea that there could be aliens being misunderstood as angels, or angels being misunderstood as aliens. And the way I see it is that people tend to see the world through whatever lens they've been given, and I think media in a lot of cases is giving people that lens through which they do see the world. So I think the media plays a really large role in this. When you talk about flying saucers, or maybe people all see flying saucers because there literally are saucers up there. But for all the people that think they see something but maybe they don't, but they interpret it as a saucer because they've heard so many people use the term saucer. Or the same thing for gray aliens. If people see something and they don't get a lot of visual information on it, they will tend to kind of chunk it in the forms of what they're kind of expecting to see. And in that way, I think the media kind of both reflects and projects onto the culture, our perception.
Mm-hmm. Sorry about that, guys. I glitched out a little bit.
Repeatedly.
Well, that makes sense.
Yep. I missed
Much
most
better
of
at
that.
standing still.
I missed most of that. Sorry about that, guys. All right. The last question I think I want to get to this one here is, what would happen, right? From a prepping perspective, what would happen if, let's say tomorrow, the president and Congress has this massive press conference and they reveal to the world, yes, aliens are here. They're space aliens from this system, and they're here. We're aware of them. We don't know exactly what their intentions are, but they are clearly way more advanced than us. How do you think people would react to that?
Not well.
People are so different. Yeah.
Orwell, was it Orwell that did the broadcast? That he did the radio show.
H.G. Wells, I think. Oh no, not H.G.
Wells. Sorry.
No, Orson Welles.
Yep. Yeah, Orson Welles. That's it. It's funny because I listen to it every year. I should know.
Yeah.
I listen to it every Halloween because I think it's hilarious.
Yeah.
But he did this radio broadcast, and it sounded like
really
news
clips
throughout the night of aliens attacking and the story of people fighting back and everything. And it was wild that people listening to that, like there were a lot of people committing suicide, people running into the hills with their food and their guns, and it'd be interesting to see what does happen because just that radio broadcast drove people insane.
I'd love to hear from you guys because I think there's another question that pairs with how would people react is how would preppers react? How would you guys react? Because I know for me, the following day would be just like any other day. I'd be working on house projects. I don't think it would really change much because, as preppers, you don't have to, get knocked down by all those punches. How do you think it would impact you guys?
Well, I mean, to go through and backtrack before I do that one, I think you would, the radio broadcast is years ago. We're a whole different breed of people now. Mm-hmm. I think you would have three groups of people. You'd have the people that freak out. You'd have the people that completely want to disprove it. No, it's completely fake. And then I think the largest group is the people that do not care. Just, nope, whatever. I'm going to still TikTok and whatever. But I'm right with you, Praxis. You just move on. It's whatever it is. I'm just going to keep on going, and you guys have fun.
Yeah. I probably wouldn't know about it for a week. We haven't had a TV for 20 years.
Yeah.
So
I always
all my
find out
info
about
comes here.
I was just going to say, I always find out about the major internet blackout like 2 days later.
I think Wayne is probably right. I think most people would freak out. I would be, because it's something that I've always been interested in and kind of hopeful for, right? Like, even though it's scary that, like, something that advanced that could just travel to our planet, obviously with it wouldn't be much for them to wipe us out if they wanted to. But there'd be, for me, a huge curiosity too. Like, where are you from? Like, how long you been there? Like, what can you tell us that you've discovered? I would want to know as much as I could and hope that they were somehow willing to be benign to us, right? But yeah, it's frightening that we would no longer be the apex species for sure. So I think I'd have a mix of fear and awe and curiosity. The alternative thought to me is like, what if Earth was the only place in the universe, in all universes, that had no life? That's an incredibly depressing thought for me.
Yeah, it's terrifying almost.
It's so sad because at some point, if we continue on the path that we're on, we will do a good job of wiping out most of the life. Maybe we'll wipe out all of it. I don't know. And it's just the idea, like if humans went extinct, right? Well, there's something very special about humans, even though we're barbaric and we're cruel and we're awful to each other and we're awful to animals and whatnot. We're also very special and we do some pretty amazing things. And if we were wiped out and that was it, nothing else, existed out there that was like us. That's incredibly sad.
Can I jump in, because there's a film that has that theme, and I'm not going to say anything more about it in case people haven't seen it, but it's called Melancholia, and it stars Kirsten Dunst as the main character. Mm-hmm. And it's a really well done film. It's kind of slow paced, not an action film or anything like that, but it has that as the theme. It's definitely worth a watch, and it's great for preppers because it's about the end of the world.
Yeah, Interstellar kind of hits on that, right?
Yes.
Interstellar. Humans are it as far as like advanced species. Humans are it. Dune, same thing. You could argue that maybe the sandworms are kind of intelligent, but for the most part, it's humans. That's it. Like that's all there is, and there's something really sad about that. But it also, I think, says like we're very special, and we probably should be a little bit more careful with each other. Mm-hmm. I want to end with a couple little thoughts here. If you guys had anything else you want to throw in, now's a good time. Or if there's anything you want to plug.
I was going to mention a different kind of alien, mm-hmm. and all the tech that we have these days. Do we really need to build a wall to protect our borders these days in this day and age? With all the tech we have, do we really need a wall?
It's kind of a primitive approach.
I don't think it helps much, to be honest with you. I think that we've seen videos where they can very easily get over and under these walls. So I don't think it helps much, first of all. I have a friend, my wife and I have a friend who's here legally, and she's applying for her citizenship, and she's going about everything the right way. She's doing, and it's very, very expensive. It's very time consuming, and it's a very hard process. Yeah. And my thoughts on this, and I'm probably more moderate than probably most people, but my thoughts on this is that if there's people who are trying to escape a really bad situation, like if I had a family that was growing up in a cartel city, I would try to get out of there any way I could.
There was no offense meant to anyone, just more of a reference to our technology that we have.
Yeah.
And our abilities that are beyond most of what we can even imagine. I think we have that already.
Yeah. Yeah, the wall doesn't really do as much as people think it is. That's for sure. That's for sure. Yeah. But I think in my ideal version of the world, obviously we need to vet people for safety. I think everybody would agree on that. But also that if there's people out there that are law-abiding and want to come here and want to work, that there should be a way for them to do that. That's not only for the wealthy. And the way our immigration process works right now, you pretty much have to be wealthy to do it legally.
Yeah. It's a big pain in the butt for people. Yeah.
So I want to finish with thank you. That was a good discussion there. I want to say thank you, first of all, to the mods. Thank you to the panel for you guys for all the great discussion tonight. I had a lot of fun with this. It's a topic I've wanted to talk about for a long time. And I'm going to end us with the video too for Praxis. For those who didn't catch it in the beginning, we'll roll it one more time. Praxis's music video. But I want to say, I always end with something positive. And I want to say, we live in a very strange world. Very, very strange. There are things that we cannot explain. There's things in physics that we don't completely understand. You might have had, if you're listening to this, you might have had paranormal experiences. You might have seen what was an alien, or maybe it wasn't an alien, but it looked like an alien. And it's hard to talk about those things because there's, you can be ridiculed, you can be bullied, you can be whatever. But I want you to remember one thing. If you've had some kind of strange experience, paranormal or otherwise out there, that you know what you experienced. Right. So that's the most important thing. Don't gaslight yourself. Right. So I know when I worked in a haunted house with a couple of my friends who had similar experiences to me, we witnessed it together. We know what happened there. And we can tell the story and people are like, okay, that's a cool story, Sarge, but we don't believe it. It doesn't matter because you know your own truth. Right. And just hold on to that. Don't gaslight yourself and question your own reality because there's so much about this world that we really don't even understand yet. Okay.
Yeah, good message.
Thanks.
That's true.
All right, you guys, I'm going to roll this video one more time for those who missed it. And if you want to see it again, you probably should hang out because Praxis did a really good job with it. Thank you again, everybody. Keep planting your seeds. Keep stacking your silver. This is the UFO and Aliens panel and Prepping with Sarge.
Pepper Joe's cannon beans in his bunker deep below. Had a shovel and some gasoline and a stack of crossbows. One sunny day, the skies turned dark. A shadow cast a shiver out from the clouds in a circus bark. Creeping clowns make you quiver. It's bird flu, clown zombies, aliens invade from Mars. Pepper Joe's ready in his long johns with a bunker full of jars. Yeah, it's bird flu, clown zombies, aliens. Now ain't that grand in the Ozarks? Preppers, hillbillies got a plan, man, got a plan. Joe grabbed a mask and old gas can and locked up tight his cellar door. Ready himself as any good man for a funky cosmic war. The clowns marched on with red balloon, honking noses, eyes aglow. Bird flu spread from dusk till noon. Joe steeled for the show. It's bird flu, clown zombies, aliens invade from Mars. Pepper Joe's ready in his long johns with a bunker full of jars. Yeah, it's bird flu, clown zombies, aliens. Now ain't that grand in the Ozarks? Preppers, hillbillies got a plan, man, got a plan.